Hey gang, welcome back to Jade's Garage. Today's video is part 2 in the Dakota Digital VHX gauge installation. In part 1, I assembled the gauge bezel, went over some details with that and things you need to take care of whenever you're doing that assembly. In this video, I'm going to try to install all the sensors and get everything connected. Hopefully, I could do all this in 2 videos, but if not, I will do a part 3 to make sure all the details are covered. If you like videos like this, hit the subscribe button and the bell notification to see more, and don't forget to hit that like button. Thanks. Okay, so I've looked over the instructions somewhat, and it talks about this quick start guide, and it looks pretty simple. You know, it just gives you the wiring connectors to go to each sensor. This switch is for actually calibrating and adjusting things later on. So what I want to do is just open up this bag and show you what's going on in here. So you have different connectors. They have different fittings on the ends, and that one's completely different as well. So by the looks of things, you know, each one of your sensors is going to have a different plug-in. So in this case, this is probably the oil, and it looks like this should be your connector for the oil. This is your speedometer adapter, so I'll have to figure out how to get that mounted. This is going to be your temperature sensor, and that is a 2-prong connector. Pretty easy to identify. So my temperature sensor is right here, right behind the distributor. So I'll have to get that out. The oil sending unit is down there, right above the oil filter, that round canister thing. So I'll have to take that off and swap in the other pieces. And then of course get underneath the car and install the speed sensor. I got the oil sending unit out. That's that little black hole right there above the filter. And to do that, I actually had to grab this with a pair of channel locks because there was no way I was getting a wrench all the way down there. There's too many things in the way of this. So it's out. So they do give you a set of adapters. You have to pick the one that's going to fit your car, and I'll put some Teflon tape around these, get this mounted, and that'll take care of the oil sending unit. Then I need to get that out and get the temperature sensor in place, and of course still run the wiring and everything like that. Just an observation, they give you a variety of adapters with this kit, but this kit also comes with metric adapters. So you're not going to use those, but it does have these, and these have crush washers. I was wondering what the washers were for, and that is what they are for. So there's one more adapter here that's rather big. Don't need that one. The one I'm going to use is this one. So that'll slip on there, thread together, obviously, put some Teflon tape on it, and there's the old sensor. So that one's out. Get this one in, and that'll take care of those two. So I threaded in the adapter first, and then I threaded in the switch, or the sensor. So that was all 3/4 inch. Now just line up the plug that in, and then this one will plug down there, of course, into the oil pressure sensor. So here's what I did. I ran the temperature sensor wire down behind the AC unit to where the oil pressure sensor is, and then I took those 2 wires and I looped them next to the existing wires in the harness, put them in that little plastic clip there. From there I come up on the inside of the shock tower, followed them around, and what I decided to do, since I'm not going to have a standard speedometer cable anymore, I pulled the speedometer cable out, pulled the grommet off of it. Of course the cable's got to go all the way out, and I'm using the hole for the speedometer cable and what's left of the grommet. I know it's really hard to see that, but that's what that is. All 3 wires are going through where the speedometer cable was. So with those 3 wires running through the firewall, I have this one just laying loose up here for the speedometer because I don't know where I'm going to run it just yet. But if I go inside the car, I can tell you that this is the wire for the speedometer. So I can't tell you the length of that, how far I can go with it. This one is for the oil sending unit, and there's enough length here you can go all the way to the back seat if you wanted to. And then the temperature one, you can go all the way to the back of the car. I mean, there's a lot of wire here. So I'm assuming, I haven't read that far in the instructions, I'm assuming that you can cut this off. I don't see why the length should matter. These are kind of a universal fit. Otherwise, you end up with a whole big spool of wire up there behind your speedometer, or your gauge cluster. But at this point, at least I have the wiring inside the car. Well, I have the car jacked up, and I have jack stands under the rear axle, and I want to show you what you need to do when you get underneath the car. The speedometer cable has a clamp mount right here on the cross member, and up on the frame is this clamp. Now you don't have to take that all the way out. You can take the bolt loose and pivot this around, and then you have to fish the cable out from up top. And on the end where it mounts into the transmission, there's a 3/8 inch bolt. So you have to take that off, and then the cable will come out of the transmission. Okay, I had to look at this a couple times because I was a little confused. When you see this adapter, well, that's the same dimension as the one that came out of the transmission. But this has a tooth or a gear drive. This does not. And I thought, well, that can't be right. There must be something missing. Well, it doesn't really tell you anything in the instructions that I could see about what you need to do, so I'm going to show you. It talks about this adapter, gives you a little written up piece of information about using this adapter with this Ford kit, and you have to use this crush washer. And that is just for assembly. Whenever you put these two pieces together, they want the crush washer in between, just so you know. Okay. Anyway, I was looking at this and I saw this had a square end on it, like, you know, regular cable, and I thought, well, maybe there's something inside the transmission, but there's not. It's just hollow in there, except for the drive. And then I started looking at this, and I realized there's a little metal clip on here. So it appears, if I can wiggle that clip off, that the gear drive comes off. I did not know that, or I had not done it before, let's put it that way. So now when you compare the two, it's the same thing. So set the cable aside. Should be able to slip that right on. And then it looks like the clip will go probably either way around the grooves there. It could go on either side. But now it's connected. So the next step is to put this back in the transmission, and of course put the bolt back in, tighten it up. It already has an O-ring on here. May put a little bit of fluid on there if you like, help it slide in easier. And then I'll add the crush washer and the adapter. Then all I have to do is plug it in. Just some information for you. This is the bolt that I took out of the speedometer cable. And you can see it has some sort of a star washer on it. I tried to put that in, and whenever I tried to put the adapter on, it interfered. So you may have to come up with something different. I didn't find anything in the instructions or any extra hardware, but I have one of these. This is a captive head screw or bolt, like an Allen head, and you can see it's got a really low profile. So compare the two, you can see the difference, but I'm going to use this in place of this. You may have to come up with your own. I don't know where I got this from. This may be some aircraft surplus that I found, maybe. So just letting you know. I tried to use it at that full length, didn't work. So I cut off some threads. Grip length is about 1/2 inch. Okay, so there's the little cap screw I was talking about, and I put the crush washer on, and the interference was right on the corner of the fitting here. Now the crush washer helps, but it still would have interfered with that bolt. You can probably see that. I can't zoom in because I'm holding the camera with my left hand and trying to assemble this with my right. So, and trying not to block everything. So anyway. And it still may be hitting just slightly. Well, that doesn't feel good at all. Oh, it's turning internally. Okay. Well, what you may have to do is assemble this outside separately, but this gives you some information now, because you'd have a real hard time getting a socket on a bolt that was there. So I may have to take this out, but I'm not sure, because really there's no way to hold that thing internally. You know, it's just a round housing. So maybe that's as tight as I can get it. For now, I'm just going to leave it alone. Okay, I see what was happening. As I was putting torque on this piece was rotating because this isn't super strong. It's meant to be a retainer, not something you can put torque against. So it spread apart. So I took it back out, and I honestly took a pair of channel locks, clamped onto this upper portion right here, and torqued against it with the crescent wrench. So now it's all one piece. I'm going to have to straighten that out and get it back in there. So there it is in place. You can see there's a zip tie around it. What I did was I brought the wire through the well, underneath the tranny tunnel. I didn't want to follow where the speedometer cable came because it came really close to the header. So I went on top of the transmission, came down, kind of looped it into this hole. I know I may have to adjust that a little because it's still close to the header there, but it's further away now than it would have been had I followed the original mount points for the speedo cable. So I had to loop it around because it would have been too tight to pull against the turn, let's say the end of the wire. So what I mean is the wire would have had a really tight, like 90-degree turn on it, and I wanted to loop it. So I could probably shorten this up a little or put it up against the cross member. But anyway, that's what I did, and then on top I used some zip ties and got it up out of the way, and I think it's looking pretty good. So basically it comes up underneath this strut brace or the shock tower brace and goes underneath it and follows the wiring back, and then of course, as I said, I use a speedometer cable grommet to feed it inside the car. And to do that, of this. So it's out. 12mm and 16mm bushings with the other wire is on the oil pressure. This one will only go about as far, a little past this wire, which I think is for the oil pressure.